COASTER-net Uncut. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of COASTER-net Uncut. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois, joined by Mr. Chess himself. No? You like Digger better?
How about this? How about I can be Blackjack because I don't like to run.
So, welcome to COASTER-net Uncut. I'm Andrew Barczyk. This is Danny Miller. And tonight, we're going to be talking about, basically, I think the only thing we've been talking about. Yes, Steel Vengeance.
Steel Vengeance.
If you're not tired of people talking about Steel Vengeance, then this is not the show for you.
That's the goal at the end of this show.
So, you know, Danny, when we were at Media Day and over the last few weeks, you know, I think we've been inundated with one question. That it's the one question that everyone asked us. I can't even tell you how many times someone asked us this question when we were there on Media Day and then in a few days following, and then since then even more so. Yeah. And that question is, where do you rank Steel Vengeance? You know, and it's an interesting question because we talked about this the day of, and I don't know if that's like, we didn't talk about it. You know, we talked a little bit about ranking in our live video from Media Day.
We talked about it towards the end of the day because you and I are kind of similar in the sense that we like to enjoy the rides while we're riding the rides, and you think about the ranking stuff and all that later, because at the end of the day, I mean, I think there's a misconception out there that because we do the poll every year in the Thrilling 32 that we're obsessed with ranking rides, and that's not really the case. I'm one that tends to not rank a ride immediately after I ride it. Sometimes I'll wait several days, or maybe I'll even ride it on a second trip. And, you know, I certainly do not rank rides after one ride. And even after 13 rides on Media Day, I was not sure and had to give it some thought after the fact because, you know, we were getting people at 5:30, 6 o'clock on Media Day that morning asking us where we ranked. And I was like, guys, can we enjoy the ride for at least a couple hours before we kind of get to that point? Like, let us ride the ride a couple times. Let us digest it a little bit. But I mean, it is a fair question, though.
Well, and I think it stems from, you know, people, when they saw this POV back in August and knew that they were RMCing, you know, Mean Streak even before that, I think a lot of people had really high expectations for this one.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
We're already talking about it being the best ride in the world. And I think you said it best, that when you go in with the expectation of something being number one, that anything less than that is a disappointment.
By definition.
By definition, categorically, it is a disappointment.
Yes, categorically, it is a disappointment. So, you know, and I don't go into any ride expecting it to be my new number one. And that's the phrases that people like to throw out here lately is new number one, and we joke around about that a lot, and the term amazing. And it seems like every time a new ride opens and people ride it, they call it amazing. And I've been very careful to not fall into that same trap because I see it all the time. I actually started to take screenshots every time I saw on Twitter or Facebook or something where someone called a ride amazing that they had ridden for the first time. And I started running out of storage space on my phone because I was doing it so often, not looking for it, just coming across it. So, you know, it's just kind of one of those pet peeves because every ride has to be amazing now. Even Merlin's Mayhem, I saw people riding Merlin's Mayhem and saying it was an amazing attraction for Dutch Wonderland. It's like, no, it was a good fit and it's a fun ride. It's not an amazing ride. Not every ride can be amazing because then categorically nothing's amazing.
Yeah.
If everything's amazing, then nothing's amazing, right?
Well,
so
it goes on the old Incredibles theory that if everyone's special, then nobody's special. So it's why because you criticize me for when I do the Tracking the Thrills. I'm very stingy with my stars.
You're stingier than I am.
Because I truly believe in that you have to look at a ride And sometimes you have to say, well, this ride is just there. This ride is just average. And
Yeah.
many times there is nothing wrong with being just average. That parks need supporting players. Parks need rides that take up space, that take up crowd, that people enjoy to ride. But it's not something that they're going to write home about. It's not something that they're going to go on.
Yeah, you need your Geminis, you need your Iron Dragons, you need your Adventure Expresses, you need your, your Mine Trains, you need, your Nighthawks and Firehawks, your Flight of Fears. You need those type of rides. You can't build Fury 325 and, Steel Vengeance and the Voyage and Lightning Ride. You can't build that ride every time as much as we would love that.
And the thing about it is like, you don't need to classify like a new ride that opens up doesn't have to be amazing, doesn't have to be outstanding to be a good investment, to be a good decision. That I think that's the other thing is that people, go to their home park and a ride like Twisted Timbers that looks like a fine ride. You've been on it, I haven't been on it. But does it need to be the best ride in the park? I don't think it does. I don't think it needs
No,
to be
I think
to be a good decision.
Yeah, I think out of the box, I think you and I said it needs to be top 3. It needs to be better than Dominator because, and we'll generalize here. But I think 95% of people will say that Volcano and Intimidator 305 are the best 2 roller coasters at that park. It needs to be number 3 behind those 2. And if it's number 2 and it's better than Volcano, which most people will tell you that they think it is, then that's even better. I don't know many people who are calling it better than I-305.
I've seen a few though. Like
I've seen some, but most folks are saying it's number 2. I would fall into that camp saying that it's my second favorite ride at that park. But again, it's all about expectations. Coaster Radio likes to throw out anticipation is the word that they kind of created, and we've kind of done some stuff on that. But it's really interesting because the definition of anticipation that's kind of been created is when you have such high expectations for a ride and it doesn't live up to expectations and you're then disappointed. You're anticipating something so much that you end up being disappointed by it at the end. And, it's when you set such high expectations for rides, you run the risk of being disappointed and experiencing so-called anticipation, even if the ride is still really good. And that was the thing that you and I had been tempering that for many months leading up to Steel Vengeance, where we said, you know what, we're not going to come out here and call it the best ride in the world before anyone's ridden it and before it's built. We're going to say that it possibly could be, but we're not going to put that expectation on it and, basically rely on it being the best coaster ever built for us to be satisfied with it. Because, as I said in our live show, I don't think that's a fair expectation to put on any roller coaster. I don't go into riding any roller coaster for the first time expecting it to be my new favorite roller coaster or, the best roller coaster in the world. Because, quite honestly, with how many roller coasters you and I have ridden, we've ridden some absolutely fantastic roller coasters and some that are very hard to beat. And some that, quite frankly, over the years, we've probably talked ourselves into thinking that they couldn't be beat. Everybody's got their sentimental favorites. You have Raptor, I have Manta. You have, Maverick, although Maverick is a ride that I think a lot of people would put up there as best anyways. I've got rides like Nemesis, which was, much like Manta. Manta was the ride that surprised me and that I always loved. Nemesis is one of my favorites in a different sense, in the fact that it was the ride that I had looked forward to for many, 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 many years, and it just so happened that I was able to make it a major milestone. And all those things combined is what makes up a sentimental favorite. Raptor, you talk about how Raptor was one of the first big roller coasters you rode, back when you were younger. And, that's how you create sentimental favorites. That's why we like to make the distinction between favorite and best all the time. So we can talk about Steel Vengeance in in both of those contexts, I think that's fair to do. But I mean, that's kind of the big difference we've always kind of made here. To put it as an expectation of best, and as that the expectation going in, I think it then has to be your favorite. Otherwise, you're disappointed with that. So we don't like to put that expectation on it. Some people do, and that's fine. But that's kind of where we stood on all that leading up to this. And like we said in the live show, 2-3 weeks out, we see the video of Tony Clark and Jason McClure riding, and that's the moment where you and I kind of collectively said, you know what? This is going to be really good.
Well, and it's funny that you bring that up, because we had a conversation with Tony Clark off camera.
We did.
And we asked him, because, he struggled with the Steel Vengeance versus Millennium Force. And he kind of echoed what you just said there, where for him, it's always going to be difficult to overcome Millennium Force, because there's a history there for him, with his
He's
emotional.
ridden it so many times. He's ridden it for so long. I mean, that definitely plays into it as well.
And like you said, with Manta and Raptor, and and Jason McClure was struggling with that, and Maverick and Steel Vengeance and Maverick, and you get down to it, and what makes it interesting is that you look at, to pull it back to Steel Vengeance here, really the only expectation we placed on this ride way back when we did the most anticipated rides is we said that it has to be the best RMC. And I don't think that's a huge mountain to overcome. Like, yeah,
that should have been easily attainable.
Like there are some really good RMCs. I think that RMC is a mixed bag. Some people love everything that they do, and that's fine. You can love everything that they do. But really, to overcome being the best RMC, I thought would overcoming Lightning Rod, which I feel that Lightning Rod has a lot of flaws on it. It has, it's short. The launch is nice. The first half is exciting, but like I said, it's short. That ending is amazing, though, and that's what really sold the ride for me. That we got off of that ride and we're like, hell, this is a really good ride.
Yeah. I think. Go ahead.
Well, no, you can go on that because I have a completely different idea.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say I think I had 3 expectations going into this ride, and I said this is what this ride needs to do to be a success and to satisfy me and to meet my expectations. And with the same way with Twisted Timbers, I said Twisted Timbers needs to be better than and I had low expectations for Twisted Timbers, which is part of the reason that I very much enjoyed my rides on Twisted Timbers, and it's actually quite high on my list of RMCs. But I said Twisted Timbers needs to be better than Storm Chaser, roughly the same size, a little bit longer, does some of the same maneuvers. Said I need to like it more than Storm Chaser. I said, and it needs to be top 3 in that park. Those are the 2 expectations I had on Twisted Timbers. Steel Vengeance, I said it should be the best RMC. If it's not, there's probably something wrong here, because it's going to have, the height and the speed of a Lightning Rod, but it's going to be far longer, many more maneuvers. It's going to have some of the RMC inversions that we do really well. It's going to have some different types of elements. Steel Vengeance should have been better than Lightning Rod, and I think it is. So it needed to be the best RMC, period, out of the block. Number 2, for me, I said, well, it probably needs to be in my top 10 steel coasters, because, and these last 2 go hand in hand. So I had that one, and I said it needs to be top 3 in the park. Said, I don't know if it has to be better than Maverick. I don't know if it has to be better than Millennium Force. I don't think it does in order for it to be a great ride. Both of those rides are in my top 10. Actually, going into riding Steel Vengeance, Maverick was top 3, I think, top 4 or 5, top 3, 4 or 5, and Millennium Force, I think, was at number 10. Bearing the hatchet there. But I didn't think it had to be better than both of those 2. But, I said it has to be number 3 in the park, because my 3rd favorite ride in the park is Magnum. Yeah. Said it needs to be better than Magnum. No question. Has to be. If it's not, then we've got a problem. And it would be nice if it cracked my top 10, because that's right around where, I have Millennium Force. And then a few spots below that, we start getting into like Wicked Cyclone, and then, eventually New Texas Giant, Iron Rattler. So by having those previous two, you kind of set the third one up, right? So those were the three expectations I had going into Steel Vengeance. I said, best RMC, top 3 at Cedar Point, and top 10 on my steel list. That's what I wanted.
And, and those are reasonable expectations for this. It's not saying that it has to be the best ride in the world. And
we left the room for it to exceed my expectations, which is important here.
And when I go back, like going onto rides for the first time, now, new rides that open, in my coaster career, like, most of the time I went to Cedar Point. I only rode rides at Cedar Point. So comparing rides at Cedar Point to other rides really never started until about, 5 or 6 years ago, probably longer now, hell. Jesus, it's 2018, probably about 7 or 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
It's been a while. So, but when I look back and I think about rides that I rode for the first time that could be number one, based on what other people had said at that point, new rides that opened, the only new ride that I ever thought could be a new number one was Fury. That looked, and remember, we had a lot of reservations about Fury.
Yeah, people forget, because that was way back when.
That was our first Uncut episode.
That was our very first show where we talked about Fury 325 and what our expectations were for it. We probably had literally in the dozens in terms of number of viewers and watchers and listeners. I encourage you to go back to the very first show we did where we talked about Fury 325. And you and I didn't expect, we said the one expectation, I think we probably put 2 expectations on it. We said it needs to be better than Leviathan. And I think that's all. I think that's really all we said. I think that's what we expected, because it was longer, it had more maneuvers, but we also said, but it doesn't have the Leviathan speed hill. We said, it doesn't look like there's going to be a whole lot of airtime in that first half because it's all turns. Boy, how wrong were we?
And I feel like I hadn't even ridden Leviathan yet. I feel like I rode Fury first. Did I?
No, didn't you do Coasting for Kids at Canada's Wonderland at some point because you forgot to do dynos?
Yeah, I did, but that was like 20. I forgot. I don't know. I don't remember. So Fury, because we had looked at the.
Did you ride Guardian?
Yeah, I rode Guardian.
So Guardian was 2014. So
okay,
it might have been before.
Yeah. So. Because the concerns we had was we saw the other B&Ms. We didn't know it would have the aggressiveness that it ended up having in that first half, where it just throws you around. That was unlike anything B&M has done before. And even when we saw the test runs, we were still kind of like, hemming and hawing about it.
Yeah, we said the speed is good, but, I mean, you're going to just have a lot of positive forces. But, I mean, the mix in the first half is incredible.
And really the only other rides that I can even think of, and I rode them far after they opened, that I can even think of that people had talked about in the sense of number one. I never thought Leviathan was going to be a number one for me, just because I liked Maverick so much. Because really Maverick's been my standard bearer for so long, that and when I look at something like Leviathan, I'm like, nah, Maverick's going to be better than that. The only other 2 rides that really pop into my mind where I thought that they could be number one was first Sky Rush, which came real close. Like, I think I ranked it like 4 right out the box.
I had Sky Rush in my top 5 for quite a long time. Now that was, I was right around the 200 coaster mark. So, I had ridden far less coasters. But, I mean, I had it up there with, the likes of Millennium Force and Maverick for, it's a little bit lower than those now. But I had it right up there. And I also rode it on opening day. So, you're hyped up, high expectations again.
Well, so you did open. So I want to go see when I rode Sky Rush and stuff now. Like, now I'm.
Yeah, I rode Sky Rush on its public opening day, Saturday, Memorial Day weekend. And then 2 days later, I was on an airplane to California, for the first time I would do that big California trip.
Yeah. So, and then the only other ride that I felt like I could possibly rank number one was I-305. And we've been down that road before where I rode Fury in the morning 14 times and then I rode I-305. And I still have I-305 ranked down in by number 10 right now. So I-305 didn't even come close. When I rode it, there was no question in my mind after my first ride that was not a number one ride. Now, I rode Sky Rush, so Storm Runner was my 250th coaster, so that would make Sky Rush like 255. So,
Okay.
and I had it pretty high then. Sky Rush has dropped a little bit since then.
Yeah, me too.
And now I want to see when I rode Leviathan, because I have a nice little list here. So I rode Leviathan. I can't tell.
Well, while you're looking at that, I think the only ride that I ever got on for the first time and said this could possibly, be a number one coaster for me. The only ride that I ever went in thinking that was a very real possibility was the Voyage. The very first time I rode Voyage in 2012, it was pouring rain. There was nobody in the park. We actually, we had done Kings Island the nights before. That was the Hurricane Isaac weekend. If Aunt Sue's watching, she'll know exactly when that trip was. And we rode Voyage in the front seat. And it was wet. The track was slick. No brake run. That was 2012, the year they had rebuilt the Spaghetti Bowl, and that thing was just so unbelievably out of this world, amazing that it hasn't left my number one spot since that day. And we're now, close to 6 years after that happened. And every time I go back to that park for Hollywood Nights, it's I say this a lot of times. It's not difficult to say that you love a roller coaster and to rank it highly, or to love a park and call it one of your favorite parks. What becomes difficult is to, especially with a number one coaster sometimes, is to go back and rewrite it and to keep it there. Sometimes, because a lot of times you end up deciding to call a ride your favorite, or ranking it number one, whatever you want to call it, because of an extra special experience you've had on it. Like the whole Nemesis thing, a milestone coaster, the ride that I had looked forward to for many, 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 many years, is a major reason it's one of my favorite coasters. Voyage was one that I had looked forward to for many years after it was built. And when I finally got out there, I was so excited and I was so happy that it was as good as advertised. And, you rediscover that every time you ride it, because as I like to say this a lot, I would do just about anything to ride my favorite roller coaster for the very first time again, because you only ride a roller coaster for the first time once. And after that, you know what's coming. You know what to expect. And you're never quite as surprised. Even if you go 10 years without riding a ride, you're never quite as surprised as you are on that very first ride. And Andy, you and I talked about this at Media Day. The mist and the fog at Media Day and the orange lights on the structure and how the fog was orange, and cutting through that fog and getting to the top of the lift hill and not being able to see the rest of the ride on Steel Vengeance, and going up that lift hill and seeing those lanterns with the flickering candles inside of them going up the lift hill there, and just being a part of that atmosphere, sitting in the back row on our very first ride. You posted the on-ride audio, to the Patreon folks, so they could hear that. And I also have, the one that I recorded on a zipper pocket on my jacket there, from our very first ride. And I've gone back and listened to that over the last few weeks. And if you watch the RPOV, that was like our fourth or fifth ride. We're hooting and hollering, and we're getting thrown all around, and we're just going with the flow and letting the ride throw us around however it wants to be. And people have made a little bit of fun of us for that over the last week or two, and that's fine. It's all in good fun. But at the end of the day, I think when you listen to the onboard audio of our very first ride and some of the comments we throw out there in the middle of the ride, what the hell was that? And then it just won't end. And then, that's raw, pure reaction that we're never going to have again. We're never, when I go through that overbank turn between the first and second inversion on Steel Vengeance. That surprised me. The first inversion where you do the barrel roll and then there's a drop after it where somehow you get airtime after leaving the barrel roll. I've never experienced that on a roller coaster before. And the first time we rode Steel Vengeance, that's the exact point where I said to you, I said, what the hell was that? Because I had no idea. Just like in Fury, how we went from bank to the right, bank to the left, how we got airtime out of that. I had no idea how I got ejector airtime coming out of a barrel roll in the back row of a ride. I just didn't know how it was doing that. And I know that that's there now. So we're never going to have quite the same experience we had on that first ride on Media Day. And that's okay because, that's the same disadvantage that every other roller coaster has. But I always go back to there's nothing like riding a new roller coaster for the first time. And a lot of times that's make or break when it comes to whether or not you fall in love with a ride or you experience the disappointment. And most people probably know this by now, but especially based on our expectations because they were lower than most other people's. And most other people seem to be saying that this ride is meeting expectations, which is good because that means they're very pleased with it, with the high expectations they had. But you and I had lower expectations compared to most other people, and it definitely exceeded our expectations, which is why Media Day and our 13 rides on Media Day were so spectacular, and why you got the raw emotion in the RPOV and the first ride audio that you've seen and heard.
Well, I feel like we've pontificated enough here on
way too much.
And we didn't really expect. We're like, what are we going to talk about here besides what we're ranking? And obviously, we found stuff to talk about as always. Let me just go into my thinking here. So, we struggled with the ranking of this. It wasn't until now. Granted, I had a very busy week. My trip out to Media Day was crazy, just like yours was.
We spent a lot of time on the phone in the following days, and we did exactly what we're doing now. We just talked a lot about the ride and did some comparison, but mainly talked about Steel Vengeance.
And it really came down to where I knew this was a top 5 ride. I knew it was a top 3 or 4 ride. Yeah. So my question was it better than Fury? So my ranking goes Raptor, Maverick, Fury. And I had to answer the question, was it better than Fury? And I think immediately at the Media Day, I think I made the decision that it was better than Fury on that Wednesday.
Yeah.
So the question became, was it better than Maverick? And that's where I got stuck for a really long time. That even leaving that Media Day, I think I said to you,
you were very conflicted.
I said, I don't know if it's better than Maverick, and I don't know if it's better than Raptor. I said, the easy answer is to do 1A, 1B, 1C. And at some level, that's cool, but at some level, I don't think that's cool, too.
No, it's taking the easy way out.
It's taking the easy way out, and I feel like you guys would call me on that, and you would want a better answer. So I thought about it, and then like a few days later, we were talking on the phone. I said, you know what? I was pulling out all my stuff for Media Day. I bought a few T-shirts. I bought a magnet. And, I have the live ranking system on my refrigerator where I move things around. I got my top 40 wood, my top 40 steel, my top 20 wood up there. So I said, you know what? It's time to rank this. And the first step was to move everything down because that's a pain in the rear.
Yeah, because I asked you if you needed to like bolt a cardboard thing to the top of your fridge to just put it above everything else so you didn't have to move.
Yeah, it was a pain. So I got to the point where I said, okay, it's better than Fury. And I put the magnet. It's a very hefty magnet. It's one of those nice, like it almost looks like glass. It's the circular one. And I put it there. I said, Raptor, Maverick, Steel Vengeance. And I looked at it. I stared at it as you sat on the phone and thought I was right. And I said, did it feel right? And I said, you know what? It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right that Maverick is good. But I felt like this was just slightly better. So I put it right there underneath Raptor. Because honestly, I don't think anything's ever going to beat Raptor. That Raptor's my ride. So
well, and I'm glad you said that because, Manta and Nemesis are my rides. Because, that's just what they are. Manta has always been my ride. And Nemesis, I mean, I'm sure people can appreciate or at least understand that when you've been looking forward to a ride for 6 years that's so far away and you finally get to ride it, and it just so happens that you're able to make it a major milestone and you're able to get night rides on it, which are so very rare over in England because the parks don't stay open late except for in the fall. And, you know, the blood red floodlights that are on there, and the terrain and the near misses with the ground and even the station, you know, all that. As you know, Nemesis is a good enough ride. I don't think Nemesis is the best roller coaster in the world. But it's one of my favorites, which is the big difference we like to make. You know, my dad always says, you know, he thinks Maverick and I-305 are the two best rides he ever, and Voyage. But one of his favorites, on top of that, he also really enjoys Cheetah Hunt because it's got some of the, you know, it's got some of the Maverick I-305, you know, type of movements, but you know, it's not quite, it's more enjoyable for some people.
It's not as fast.
So, you know, Manta and Nemesis, I think, are always going to be two of my favorites. But then I said, okay, throw that out the window for a second. Let's talk about best. And let's talk about where it goes on that list, because that's really what I was trying to determine. And for me, I have Fury and Maverick switched for you. I have Fury, then Maverick and I-305. So that's kind of, so I said to myself, same thing you did. You were contemplating about Fury, and I was kind of thinking along with you, not as vocally as you were, but you were thinking, is it better than Fury? Because that's the question I needed to ask myself to get it to best steel coaster. Because if I say yes to that, then categorically I've called it the best steel coaster that I've ridden. So I said, is it better than Millennium? Absolutely. That's one expectation down. Or it's better than Magnum. Absolutely. So that's one expectation down. We're 1 for 1. Is it in my top 10? I said absolutely. We talked to Arthur Levine from the USA Today travel section. His article went up yesterday where I was quoted in there. And I told him in the interview, I said, typically it takes me a few days to digest a ride and actually rank it, because that was one of the questions he asked. And I said, but I will tell you this. It's definitely a top 10 coaster for me. It's easily top 5, which is where I left it. I said, it's easily in my top 5. So that right there makes it one of the best in the world. And I said, definitely top 10 without question, easily top 5, probably top 3. Probably. So that gets us to Maverick, I-305, Fury, and Steel Vengeance. I like it better than Maverick and I-305. I think it's better. I think it does more. You know, the speed is there. The sustained speed is there, because Maverick and I-305 have very good sustained speed, which is something we talk a lot about. Steel Vengeance does that. It's got the airtime. It's got the inversions, definitely. It's got the nonstop relentlessness that I really enjoy. You know, Voyage, Lightning Rod, I-305, Maverick, Fury, they're all rides that don't really have any slow spots. You could argue each of those rides maybe has one spot where you can kind of get your breath. Yeah. Steel Vengeance, I think the mid-course is kind of that, but you know, even Voyage kind of has that spot. Lightning Rod doesn't really have, but Lightning Rod's so much shorter than a lot of those other rides. You know, Fury, you have it in the helix maybe. I-305, there's a trim there over that one airtime hill. Maverick has the launch in the middle where you just get a few brief seconds. So then I got to Fury. And I thought about it, and I thought about it long and hard. And I finally decided what you ended up deciding. I said, is this ride better than Fury 325? And I said, you know what? Yeah, it is. And because it doesn't go quite as fast, but it goes really fast.
Yeah.
It's lengthwise, it's not quite as long in terms of track length, but in terms of ride time, it's right there. You know, 1.5 minute time of action is what I like to call it. Right there. It's got incredible airtime. It's got floater airtime. It's got ejector airtime. It's got hang time airtime, something that Fury doesn't really have. Now Fury doesn't go upside down, so you can't really, that's not really fair there. But it's smooth, okay? It doesn't beat you around. The restraints, okay, the restraints are what they are. I understand, much like rides with Skyrush and Lightning Rod, that if you want to ride that's that intense and that wild, you're gonna have to put up with restraints that maybe aren't ideal. That's fine. Yeah. I don't have a problem with that. Boy, oh boy, I couldn't find anything wrong with it. I rode it 13 times right next to you each and every time. We rode it in the back. We rode it in the front. We rode it in the middle. We rode it on both sides of the station. I could not find something that I didn't like about this ride. And people who know me know that I played hockey for 15 years and I've had 5 concussions, and I tend to get compression headaches on really intense rides. From coming down into the seat at the bottom of the drop. And I've gotten them on Fury, I've gotten them on Voyage, I've gotten them on Lightning Rod, I've gotten them on other wood coasters like Mystic Timbers, I've gotten them on I-305, Maverick even, just because they're that intense. And at the end of our 13 rides, when I got out to the car, I popped 3 ibuprofen because I had a compression headache. And that's good. That's a good thing for me. Usually when you get off a ride and you have headaches, that's not a good thing for people. For me, that tells me that that's a ride that has everything I want. And I finally decided that when we're talking about when you throw out the favorites and, you put that aside for a second and the sentimental value of rides, is Steel Vengeance the best steel roller coaster that I've ridden? I've come down to answer that question with, yes, I think it is.
Yeah. So for all intents and purposes, we're both saying that this is the best steel coaster either of us have been on. Now, let's take it one more step, because there's still one more problem here.
There is.
Because both of us have said in the past,
for the first time, you and I agree on a steel coaster.
Well, true, but we've agreed on the wood coaster for a while. We have both said that Voyage is the best roller coaster in the world. Period.
And we've made the comparison that Steel Vengeance is the steel version of Voyage. I remember talking to Coaster Radio, the guys who are on Coaster Radio. Kevin Welch said, Dan T-shirt guy and Andy made the comparison of how Steel Vengeance is Voyage, the Steel Voyage. And people always joke around, they should RMC the Voyage. Well, you know what? They did. It's called Steel Vengeance. So leave the Voyage the hell alone and go ride Steel Vengeance if you want a steel version of the Voyage.
Well, it's funny because on that first ride, on-ride audio, coming into that break run, I made that comparison
immediately.
Right away.
And I didn't think of that at first, but as soon as you said it, I kind of looked at you and I said, you know what?
That's what this is.
That's exactly what it is.
So I think for me, I'm curious to see where you go with this, because I don't know if you go the same way I do. I think for me, I think Steel Vengeance is better than Voyage, because I don't know. Like, the first ride I had on Voyage, I sat in the front row during the day.
Yeah, you've told this story before. I remember this.
And I didn't think it was that amazing. That people had, I remember the term being thrown around that riding Voyage is a religious experience.
Yeah.
That's a big mountain to overcome. That's not being the
expectations.
That's a big mountain to overcome. So, And it wasn't until I rode in the back row during the day that I came closer to that assessment that it's probably the best wood coaster in the world. And then obviously in subsequent rides at night and at Hollywood Nights and all that great stuff, that I've come to the conclusion that not only is it the best wood coaster, but it's probably the best roller coaster in the world. So this one, though, I may have not come to that conclusion right off the bat, but I had, like you had, an amazing first ride on Steel Vengeance that I think we made it a point, we stood by the entrance and I made it a point that I was going to be on that first train in the back row.
Yeah.
That was my seat I wanted. And if I didn't get that seat, and
we were going there hell or high water.
And it was dicey walking up those stairs because we were not the first ones in the queue.
No.
There were people in front of us, and they chose to go towards the front of the train. which I'm like, well, that opens up the back for me. So we got that.
Stars aligned for us, Andy, for that first
So,
ride.
I didn't want to have to push people off the station. You know, I didn't want to get in a fight on the very.
No, because we wanted to get a few rides in before we started beating people up.
Absolutely. So, you know, I had a really good first ride on Steel Vengeance, and I'm going to say, you know, Voyage, I still think that first drop, even though Steel Vengeance's first drop, I think is lacking for whatever reason. We said this on the live show. Like, I just rode Goliath at Great America, which is a 200-foot drop. It just seems like that drop is better than Steel Vengeance's.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both 200 feet. I don't know what's lacking, but Voyage's first drop is lacking even more so. And Voyage's first half is fun. Like, you get out of your seats, but it's really not until that spaghetti bowl and that brake run where things really get crazy.
Well, Voyage and Steel Vengeance, I think, share a lot of similarities in that we've kind of talked about where, you know, the first, we joke around that both of those rides have three halves. Well, the first half is, you know, your big swooping hills, and then, you know, you kind of get into the middle half, which is some of your crazier twists and turns, which is where I think you get on Steel Vengeance with the first two inversions. And then the third half is everything after the mid-course brake run on both rides, and that's where it just goes completely berserk on both rides.
Yeah. So it does go completely berserk. After that mid-course on both rides, that's where the shit, that's where business picks up, as Jim Ross would say.
Yeah, just all hell breaks loose.
So I think, given that the first half of Steel Vengeance I find to be better because you have that crazy inversion that you get airtime on,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that Steel Vengeance is the best roller coaster in the world.
Well, and you were correct in your assessment a few minutes ago. I still think I tend to lean Voyage, and you know why that is. You know, the Hollywood Nights experience for me is something.
Is that sentimentality, or is that based on ride experience? Because, like,
No, it's based on ride. I think it's based on ride experience, but there is a little bit of sentimentality that comes into it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as people know who either know me or have listened to the show, I purchased the Voyage Zen ride at Hollywood Nights last year, and you know, a very close group of friends of mine, we happened to use that opportunity as a memorial ride for our friend Elaine, who had passed away last winter, a little over a year ago now. And I remember, you know, my buddy Kevin Wilson said, he made the comparison on the first night on Friday night riding Voyage at night. He said, it's like, I didn't fight in Vietnam, but I imagine it was something like that. I remember you know, he's a really funny guy. You know, I sat next to him on the one ride, and he was like, "What is it doing to us?" like the same, like what pissed this ride off. So, but I remember, you know, and we all got very emotional after we did that memorial ride, and I remember him specifically saying, you know what, that was the greatest ride I've ever had on any roller coaster. I don't know if it'll ever be topped, and I don't think it ever should. And I think that sums up, again, that goes into the whole Manta Nemesis thing. That moment and that ride with all of my friends in honor of, you know, a friend who has passed on is kind of, it's the best wood coaster in the world, and I think the best roller coaster in the world. But when you couple that with a bit of sentimental value, that just makes it so much more difficult for me to find something that I enjoy more. So for me, I still say, if someone asks me best roller coaster you've been on, period, I probably still tell people the Voyage. But if people ask me my favorite ride, I'll tell them the Voyage as well. But if people ask for the best steel roller coaster in the world, I probably now answer that with Steel Vengeance.
Well, you know, that's funny that you bring that up, because now you got me thinking about a third topic and a third discussion, which some of you may say doesn't make sense. But when I talk about best rides I've ever had on a roller coaster.
Yeah, we've talked about this too, and we've talked about this with, how do you rank your rides? Do you rank them off of your last ride? Do you rank them based off of your best ride? Do you rank them kind of based on the collective? And everybody does it differently. But, I will probably always say the best ride I've ever had on any roller coaster was that night ride last year on the Voyage with all my friends during our Memorial Zen ride, if you will. But honestly, that very first ride on Steel Vengeance might be very, very close to that. It might even be number 2. I don't know. I've had a lot of great rides.
I've had a lot of great rides, and I've been on a lot of great rides. And rides on Skyrush pop to mind.
My Nemesis night rides are up there for sure too.
But there's a few that stick out, and there's one that really sticks out for me, and it's that I've talked about this story before, and there's actually 2 rides here that I want to talk about. The first one was on Maverick on a night ride that there had been a storm that day. It was raining real bad. The park had cleared out, and it was a night ride on Maverick. Probably. Man, what was it? Was it Halloween? It was probably during Haunt.
It was during Haunt. I remember that.
It was during Haunt, and I waited, and it was just a perfect ride on Maverick. It was the perfect ride. Every single element felt exhilarating. This is like probably at this point my 100th ride. I don't count number of rides I have on a ride, but it's well beyond the first time I rode it, and it just felt like that first time. Mm-hmm. And then the only other ride that I can really remember being like, oh my God, on, and I remember I was with Stephen Lynn. Yeah. I don't remember if I was with Stephen Lynn on the Maverick ride too. It might have been the same night. Something must have been in the air. It's funny because it was on Mean Streak, and people are gonna be like,
you know what? I'm glad you went there, because I was gonna give you mine here too, because there's 4 or 5. I know we're kind of going off here, but I think it's a good topic to talk about. So the Memorial ride we had on Voyage, definitely, I don't think will ever be topped, and I don't think it should. Our first ride on Steel Vengeance, I think, is definitely in the discussion there. Yeah. The 2 night rides I got on Nemesis, and we talked about this a little bit. Rita at Alton Towers was closed all day, and it opened up about a half an hour before we were supposed to leave, and we found this out while we were waiting in line for Nemesis, and we were with it was Sue and myself, and we were with our buddy Matt from Yorkshire and his girlfriend Bex, and we were in line for it. And I told Matt, I said, if there's one thing I do on this trip, I'm riding Nemesis in the back row with you at night, because like that was his ride, and it's become my ride, but it's really his ride. But that was something I wanted to do. And when we found out Rita opened, it was a decision time, because Rita's, Alton Towers is huge. So to get to Rita and just get in line for one ride, with the cut the line thing we had, would have taken up that entire time. And most other people, including Adam Beard and Josh Ranger from In the Loop, they went and rode Rita. They rode Rita. I did not. So, they've got one up on me there. But at that point, there, Matt kind of said to me, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, is it really worth getting out of this line to go ride Rita? He said, I don't think so. And I said, let's ride Nemesis a couple times. And that's exactly what we did. So those night rides, and I have no regrets to doing that. I'll get back there one day. Hopefully I'll get to ride Rita. In the Germany trip coming up, there's an exact clone of it, Desert Race at Hyde Park. So, I've got that too. Nemesis is, once in a lifetime. Yeah. There's no other ride like it. That's definitely one. I've had some great Maverick night rides. Definitely have had. I've always enjoyed my Millennium and Magnum night rides as well. They are outstanding. My very first ride with my dad on Top Thrill Dragster was really, really cool. And we also had a really good ride on Apollo's Chariot years back, and I think it was like 2009. It was my first trip down there. We went down specifically to ride the Big Bad Wolf before it closed. That was my first trip down there. But another really good one was 2 years ago, Labor Day weekend. It was Adam the Beard Man and myself, and we went for our last ride on Mean Streak. We went right at sunset. I said, you know what? Let's ride this ride right as the sun's going down, while the ride's in its twilight. Let's get our last ride on twilight, and let's ask for jellyfish. and, we got jellyfish, and it was a really good ride. It was a lot of fun. There was good airtime. There was some good side-to-side action. It threw me around. I had no issues with Mean Streak on that day. We had a lot of fun. And Mean Streak, not one of the best coasters in the world. Never was, and was never meant to be. But in terms of a memorable ride and a really fun ride and one of my favorite rides, that was definitely another one up there. And I think that's kind of the same experience that you sort of had.
Well, my ride came well before all the jellyfish nonsense, well before the announcement that it was closing.
Right.
Stephen Lynn and I had spent part of the day together at Cedar Point, doing some haunt stuff probably.
Yeah.
Because we were filming the haunts and all that great stuff. So we decided to go ride Mean Streak, and both of us had no expectations on it. Just thought it was another Mean Streak ride. Yeah. And Stephen Lynn's significantly younger than I am. So he's maybe even a little younger than you.
He's a little bit younger than me, yeah.
So, I rode Mean Streak when I was a kid. I rode it in 92, before all the nonsense, before the brakes, and before, they would pump everything and slow it down to what most people know it as.
Yeah.
And I've always contended that Mean Streak was a good wood roller coaster. Not the best. I contend it was better than the Beast most of the time. That the first time I rode the Beast, I remember clearly saying to my sister sitting next to me, I don't know why people bitch about Mean Streak and then put this piece of crap in their top 10, because there was no difference to me.
Well, that's another good one. In the 2012 trip that I mentioned where I first rode Voyage, we rode the Beast right after it reopened after a thunderstorm, and the track was wet at night. And as we got to the top of the second lift hill, the Hurricane Isaac ride, we saw a huge lightning bolt go across the sky behind the Eiffel Tower, and then we went down into that helix. And that was unbelievable. I also had one night ride on Fury where I was riding in the front at the end of the night, very last ride of the night, and for whatever reason, we didn't hit that trim on that airtime hill. And that ride, that was definitely up there too. But yeah, I mean, Mean Streak.
Well, let me finish my story. I didn't finish my story.
So, okay. Well, sorry, you mentioned the Beast. I wanted to.
I got into my Beast rant, and you thought I was done.
Well, I wanted to counter argument I wanted to make a counter argument to your Beast nonsense.
So anyway, so we get up to the station, and they were. It might have been wet too. I'm not sure if it rained. But they were pulling off one of the trains for the nights. So we got onto so we had to wait. We're a little irritated. We're like, what the hell? So we get into the train. They dispatch us, and we're expecting the traditional Mean Streak ride that we're preparing for the worst.
Yeah.
We got on that lift hill, and we went down that first lift, and the brakes don't hit. And I look at Stephen Lynn, and immediately I say to him, those brakes didn't hit.
That's a neat feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, we're in for something special here. And I forget if we were in the front row. Hell, I don't even remember where the hell we were sitting. I'd have to talk to him. It's been a while. And then we got to the mid-course, and we didn't really pump on the mid-course either. So we're flying through this track. We are absolutely flying through Mean Streak. And it took me back to 1992. Here I am in the year 2015 or whatever it is, and I'm back in 1992 getting to remember how Mean Streak was.
Yeah.
And that was just a really cool ride. And no, I didn't move it up my rankings. Like I didn't feel like I needed to, but it reminded me that I wasn't crazy, because I always said Mean Streak was a good roller coaster at one point. And a lot of people say no. Even if you read Dick Kinzel's book, he's like, even when he wrote the first time, it wasn't that good.
He knew he didn't have a winner.
But under certain conditions, under certain circumstances, it could be a really good ride. The only other ride that I can remember even coming close to those two would be my one ride on Magnum. And it was kind of replicated by Steel Vengeance, that you got to experience that with the fog. That we were on Magnum, and we went up into the fog, and it was completely white all around you. How many times did we get that on Steel Vengeance on Medium?
I would say if we rode it 13 times, there were at least 6 or 7 where at the top of the lift hill we could not see. We didn't see Dragster all day. We didn't see Millennium Force all day.
Except for the stuff on the ground underneath you.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't see Millennium Force. We didn't see Millennium Force except for when we drove in, we couldn't even see it. And when we drove out, we could see it. We didn't even see the top of Dragster because you couldn't see the top of Dragster when we walked in by the Magnum gate. You didn't see Dragster from the ride. There were probably 5 or 6 rides where at the top of Steel Vengeance, we could not see the second and third hills. We couldn't see the ground. And we certainly couldn't see Millennium or Gemini or, Dragster at all throughout the day. You could barely see Maverick if you turn behind us. And if you watch the RPOV, look behind us, you can't see anything. Yeah. And that was how it was all day. And especially at that night ride when it was a little bit cooler, and the sun wasn't trying to burn off any of that. I mean, it was just really something to go through the fog and to really not see what was coming.
Yeah. So those are my top rides. Those are probably my Maverick, Mean Streak, Steel Vengeance, and Magnum. And
I think the on-ride audio of that Steel Vengeance ride will support that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I find it real strange that 2 of them are on the same structure for 2 completely different rides. Like,
isn't that funny?
It's a strange occurrence and happenstance of history there.
Yeah, it's real funny because after our last ride on Mean Streak, I remember Adam and I decided that we were gonna do like a silent ride because some people like to do that. So arms up, we ate so many bugs on that ride. It looked like we had black chicken pox on our arms by the end of it because we had hit so many little bugs. And I remember us walking down the exit ramp. And I said, you know what? That was a really good ride. That's how I want to remember that ride. And he was like, yeah, I agree with you. He's like, that was really good. Now RMC the shit out of it. And so you know what? And you know what? I said that after my last ride on the Georgia Cyclone. I said, you know what? That's how I want to remember that ride. I really enjoyed my rides on it this weekend. Go ahead. Have at it.
Well, I'll say this. This episode has made me very happy, remembering all the great times that we've had.
It's gone a little bit of a different direction than we initially intended, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we've had a lot of good discussion. I'm really kind of interested. I'm really kind of interested to hear what some of their single greatest ride or single favorite ride, whether it was on your favorite roller coaster or not. I'd really like to hear what some people's other experiences are, and maybe we'll have to do a separate show on that where other people kind of write in and talk about what some of those experiences were, because I bet we'd get a lot of oddball ones like the Mean Streaks and the Nemesises and some of the other oddball ones that you would never think. Maybe somebody's got one about the Cedar Point Wildcat or disaster transport at night. Oh, wait a minute, how's that?
Well, that's another ride. It's my final ride on paddle wheel. Like that one. Now you brought up something else, and I forgot about that up until this moment. My final ride on paddle wheel excursion, Greatness was the captain that night, and that was Dick Kinzel. He put on the costume and took us around and did the spiel and did some great stuff, and that was a sad time. My final ride at paddle wheel, but whatever.
I remember getting my mom to ride the Phoenix, and she's not much of a coaster person. Getting her to ride Phoenix in the third row was a lot of fun, and also getting her to ride Verbolten when she didn't know what was coming. Yeah. That one was especially fun. So,
I tell you what, we could be here all night if
we could. So let's leave that for another show.
So just as a final update here, we talked about Patreon a lot here. You can find that first ride audio on Patreon right now. We did add another tier onto Patreon, which is a $10 tier. But this one, we're going to do something a little different, that every month we're going to have a raffle that if you enter into that tier, we're going to raffle off some cool things like posters or stuff or memorabilia that we have lying around. You also get a COASTER-net t-shirt by just signing up for the first month as a signing bonus. And then every month after that, you will get one raffle chance into the pot. And we will pick winners every month out of that $10 to see some cool stuff that we have lying around. So like I said, up to you guys that we don't like begging for money, but we thought we'd throw it out there to tell you what's going on there. You get a t-shirt and you get some raffle chances. Pretty cool deal. So anyway, thank you for joining us here on COASTER-net Uncut. We've had a wonderful time tonight. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
And as always, ride on, Ride Warriors.
Talk to you next time, guys.